I'm Edward October, host of OctoberPod, and you're listening to a special multi-part series by A Nefarious Nightmare called Minding the Beehive. Before we begin, we felt it our responsibility to issue a stern warning. This series serves as a deep dive exploration into the attacks committed by a serial rapist. This will include detailed first-hand accounts from the victims of this assailant. While this series is meant to raise awareness and inspire vigilance, we do understand that such content may trigger painful emotions for certain individuals. Listener discretion is therefore very strongly advised.
I think the worst part, still to this day, I think the absolute worst part is that anybody would help somebody who's such a monster do mean, messed up things to people who didn't deserve it. I mean, I can't imagine, now that I have kids, I can't imagine, but if my kids had ever been put in the situation that I was put in, I probably would have killed somebody. He ends up passing the background check, but I had already been hanging out with him. All of this stuff had already happened. And after this had happened to me, my caseworker comes back and she's like, hey, I thought you said this kid was younger. He should be about 19 right now, right? Because he was 18 last year. And I said, yeah, I believe he's 19. And she said, he's not 19. He's actually older. She told me at the time he was 22. Almost about to turn 23.
Last week, we heard Courtney and Mama D discuss the series and offer up support. This week, we will be concluding our Minding the Beehive series by listening to Alex, who has shared their story anonymously.
We will also be concluding Season 2 of this podcast. Please stick around at the end of this series for announcements. With that, I'm Courtney Fenner.
And I'm Amanda Cronin. And A Nefarious Nightmare presents Minding the Beehive, Surviving a Serial Rapist, Part 8.
Throughout this series, you've heard stories from many of the victims of Adrian Vildusea. Part 1 of Holly's story, Part 2 of Grace's, Part 3 was Kitty, Part 4 was Tatum, and Part 5 was Haley.
When we dropped Part 6, Telephone, which showed the sickening phone call, and then the conversation with True Crime Cat Lawyer, and then Part 7, Healing, which was the conversation with Petals of Support.
Throughout the entire series, we've highlighted key points on narcissism and offered up a few tips on how to be able to identify sexual assault, sexual abuse, etc. Originally, when we started this series, we thought it would just be 2 parts and a bonus episode, but more and more people came forward wanting their stories to be told.
It just goes to show you that the amount of victims of sexual assault are believed to be more than just statistics show. It also unfortunately brings to light that these rapists are often swept under the rug or have their hands slapped, with little to no repercussion. I want to add here that the feedback about this series has been absolutely wonderful, and these stories have been heartbreaking and eye-opening. We are honored to have been able to offer these ladies a platform to share their voice and be heard. And also honored to know that we may have played a part in saving someone else from having to go through all of this.
Prior to preparing for Part 6, a young lady who wished to go under the pseudonym of Alex came forward and asked to share her story. I had the opportunity to interview her, and come to find out, she was assaulted by him as a minor, and twice.
This will go to show how disgusting this assailant is, and we are absolutely thankful that she came forward, because we need Adrian to know that we need all serial rapists and sex offenders to know that you may think you're getting away with things, but not for long.
With that, allow us to introduce Alex.
My pseudonym is Alex. I am 24 right now. This took place in Tucson, Arizona. I met Adrian in August of 2013, he was visiting my high school campus and hanging out with the teacher. He had already graduated at that point. When I met him, he was supposed to be hanging out with that teacher, and he had asked how old I was. I was 16 the first time, and I was 17 the second time. So I met Adrian while he was visiting the campus of my high school that I had just started in August of 2013. And he was supposed to be hanging out with, I think it was my math teacher. He asked me how old I was, and I told him, I was 16. He said he had just graduated high school. He was 18. He had just finished school. And he asked me if I had a cell phone, but I didn't because I lived in a group home at the time. And so he offered to give me a ride home. But I didn't feel anything. Like he made me feel like he genuinely cared about me when I met him. So, and it was a point in my life where I felt like nobody cared about me. So I agreed to let him give me a ride home. I think that he definitely took advantage of the fact that I was very vulnerable, because within the first, 20 minutes of meeting him and talking to him, he actually was about to leave campus, and I didn't have any friends, so I didn't talk to anybody. I mean, I was new to the school. All the people I had met had kind of thought that I was weird. I mean, I was the emo scene kid, so but I definitely think that he took advantage of the fact that I felt like I didn't have anyone, because I really did open up to him in like a short 20-minute period. I mean, it was a lot. When I met Adrian, I didn't notice any of the red flags. I truly thought like he was a genuine person. I mean, he didn't have as many tattoos as he has now, but he's had a couple, and I was like, oh, this guy, he's actually very attractive. And because I met him differently than a lot of people, I actually met him in person. There was no online exchange beforehand, so me meeting him in person, I think that I was attracted to the fact that he seemed like he cared about me. He seemed like he was actually interested in getting to know me at a time when nobody else was. And I think that made him even more attractive to me. Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, when I met him, I probably thought he was a 6 out of 10. But because he was nice to me and talked to me and wanted to give me a ride home and just genuinely seemed like he cared, I thought maybe he was an 8 out of 10 just based on personality, but I never noticed any red flags at first, and I didn't have any bad vibes. I don't know. I mean, at that point in my life, I also wasn't really paying attention to vibes, but I'm sure if I had, I probably would have picked up on some bad ones at some point. If I could pinpoint any red flags that I think I missed when I was younger, I mean, I probably should have had him verify how old he was and why he was actually on campus, and how long ago did he actually graduate, because, that all of that stuff was super important. But because I was going through whatever I was going through, I just didn't even think to ask about that stuff. But all of that stuff would have been red flags, because I would have found out he lied about his age. I would have found out that he actually wasn't visiting a teacher on campus. I would have found out all this other stuff that I feel like totally could have been deal breakers for me. And then I wouldn't have been in the situation that I was put in. Now that I'm older, and now that I know like all the stuff that I know about him, I would definitely describe him as the most evil, vile human being I have ever had the displeasure of knowing. When I met Adrian, he told me that his name was Adri. He left out a lot of details. I mean, I never knew his last name. I didn't really know anything about him until he gave me a ride home. He asked me, he had obviously already asked me for my phone number. He asked me if I had social media, but I was living in a therapeutic group home, so I didn't have any of that stuff. When I finally did have social media, which leads to the second time that this happened, he added me under Adrian Vildusa. To my knowledge, Adrian has been a predator since a couple years before me. I was probably one of his first victims. I mean, I know I was somewhere in between number 1 and number 7. So I'm thinking he probably was doing this way before me, but I mean, I'm sure there's stuff that goes back maybe 2007 and we just don't know it yet. The first time that I met Adrian, obviously he was supposed to be visiting a teacher on campus. When I talked to him, he had said, you know, he hadn't thought about getting a job yet. He had just graduated, and he just wasn't ready to leave high school behind. So he gave me a ride home. I did agree to let him give me a ride home. And when we got close, I was not supposed to agree to rides home. I was supposed to take the bus because I lived in a group home. But knowing that I trusted him and thought, you know, it wasn't a big deal for him to give me a ride home just one day. I had seen him a couple of times before he gave me a ride home. But he started giving me a ride home. I think it was a Tuesday. And then he gave me a couple of rides home before he ended up locking me in his car. And he had asked me to sit with him, and he pushed my seat all the way back, and he said, you know, oh, I'm lonely and I'm sad about, you know, not being able to be in high school anymore. I'm sad that I graduated, and, you know, and I was like, okay, I'll give him a hug, right? Like, that's what friends do. I didn't think we were romantic interests. I didn't think that there was any physical chemistry. And so I gave him a hug, but when he hugged me back, he gripped me too tight, like to the point where I felt like I couldn't breathe at all. And I had asked him to let me go. He wouldn't let me go. I was wearing a skirt at the time. He was rubbing on my thighs. He was trying to stick his hands in my, you know, underwear. And he was making me very uncomfortable. And I had asked him to stop several times, but he never did. And I mean, I have not worn a skirt since that happened. But I would say, I mean, it felt like hours for me, but I would say after like 40 or so minutes, he dropped me off at my group home. I ended up getting in trouble because I was super late getting back. But I mean, to this day, I don't fully remember what happened because after the first time, I got put on antidepressants. I got put on anxiety medication. I stopped trusting men, and I started seeing a therapist. And because I started seeing a therapist, my therapist taught me how to block out trauma. So after the first time, I did not talk to him again. Because my foster mom didn't believe me when I told her what happened to me, and she called my caseworker and told her that she didn't want me in her house anymore. So, in October of 2014, I got social media for the first time since being in the system, and I was on my 21st high school. I had gone to 21 different high schools at that point. And I was on my 29th group home, and I had just switched to a young adult program called Independent Living, and I was going to like an alternative high school so that I could finish school, and I thought that things were going great. And then Adrian added me on Facebook, and he added me on his profile, Adrian Steven, and I was going, at this point, this is like a whole year later, a whole year later. I was at a point in my life during this time where I was like, oh, people can change, you know, people are different every year that goes by. And so I accepted his friend request. He told me that he had gotten his own place, and that he wanted to see me sometime and apologize and tell me like how truly sorry that he was for what happened. And obviously, because I was in foster care still and had been going through the same stuff for years with the system being broken, I trusted him and I believed him, and I felt like I didn't have anybody. So I went to see him, and I saw him every day for a couple of weeks. And it started with the first time I went to see him, I had said something to him that he didn't like, and he hit me. And then he told me like, oh, I didn't mean to do that to you. I would never actually hurt you. I would never intentionally do that. I don't know what got over me. It must have been, something else. And he was like, sometimes, you really bring out the worst in me, which is really weird because we had only been talking for a short period of time, and I didn't feel like we had any arguments. I didn't feel like there were any problems leading up to that. But over the next couple of weeks of me hanging out with him, he would pick me up every day after school, and sometimes we would ride the bus because he didn't always have a car. He wasn't supposed to be driving. I still didn't know how old he was. But I had bruises everywhere after a couple of weeks, and I had lied to my group home about what happened. I was skateboarding at the time, so I would blame a lot of it on falling off my skateboard. I would tell my teachers at school that I, fell and got hurt. One time a tree branch struck me in the eye, because I just felt like he loved me, and I had to come up with reasons for why I was hurt all the time or why I always had bruises. When we would argue, he would grab me too hard, and when we were fighting, he would cuss me out and completely freak out and lose his mind and throw things at me and lock me like in the house and not let me go anywhere. And then he would tell me like, oh, I'm sorry that happened. I love you. Like, I'm sorry that happened. And it'll never happen again. And I swear this is the last time. And one day he choked me with a belt until I passed out. And then he tied me to his bed. It was like, it was late. It was late at night. It was like maybe 9 or 10. It was a school night. And my semi-independent home, if you weren't home at a certain time, you would get, your caseworker would get called. They would call the cops and tell them that you were a runaway. They would put you on restrictions. They would, take away your privileges. You got $50 a week on a food gift card. If you were late 3 times that week, you'd lose your gift card and have to figure out how to pay for your own groceries. And I was afraid because I had already had strikes for sneaking out with like my friends to go hang out with Adrian or go to parties or whatever. I was afraid I was going to get kicked out. And this was my last chance at a group home. I was like in deep. So he wouldn't let me leave. And I kept telling him like, I promise I'll come back. If you let me go home, I won't tell anybody what happened. I'll be quiet. I'll see you tomorrow. It's not a big deal. But I do have to go because I'm going to get kicked out and I'm going to be reported as a runaway and the cops are going to be looking for me and they know who you are. And so he let me go. And then I did come back one last time because I wasn't going to see him again after that. But I did come back because I found out I was pregnant. And when I told him about that, he had a couple of neighbors that he was very close friends with, and they all assaulted me. And this is obviously, it's October of 2014, so Halloween's like right around the corner. They ripped my clothes, they threw me out of a vehicle by the University of Arizona, and I walked home covered in my own blood. My clothes were ripped, my cell phone was broken, and I was telling people, cars that were passing by, people that were walking by, that I needed help. And a lot of people were like, oh, I like your costume. oh, that's the greatest Halloween costume I've ever seen. Anyways, I didn't, obviously, I still didn't really have any friends, and so that was probably one of the worst experiences of my life, because after that, not only was I judged by him, I was judged by his friends. They were all stalking me on Facebook. They were all talking shit to me on Facebook, and I don't know who they were. I still, to this day, don't know anybody that would have helped him. But at that point, I was very new into my pregnancy. I literally just found out. I had an appointment the next day. I didn't think he was going to be mad at me because he said he loved me. And I didn't know that, he had friends that would want to run a train on me. But I don't know if that was planned before, or if that's just something that he did because he got bad news or whatnot. But when I went to my doctor's appointment, I was miscarrying, and Adrian ghosted me because I told him that I was coming after him, and I never talked to him again. That pregnancy would have resulted in me carrying his child. I think the worst part, still to this day, I think the absolute worst part is that anybody would help somebody who's such a monster do mean, messed up things to people who didn't deserve it. I mean, I can't imagine now that I have kids, I can't imagine, but if my kids had ever been put in the situation that I was put in, I probably would have killed somebody. I mean, I spend a lot of time being upset because I'm like, oh, I was in foster care. Why didn't my group home staff tell me something? Or why didn't my caseworker say something about me hanging out with this guy? I mean, I had to run a background check on him for me to be able to visit with him, because that was a rule of being in CPS. You had to have a background check. You had to have people approved for overnights, and he never got approved for overnights because he was a male and he was over the age of 18. But they did run a background check, and actually the background check is how I found out how old he was. My caseworker, and obviously they had already run the background check and everything while I was hanging out with him, because my caseworker was super cool. So she had told me, oh yeah, you can go hang out with him and we'll just wait for the results. And if the results say, he's got a record, you can't hang out with him anymore. And so, yep, exactly. And so he ends up passing the background check, but I had already been hanging out with him. All of this stuff had already happened. And after this had happened to me, my caseworker comes back and she's like, hey, I thought you said this kid was younger. He should be about 19 right now, right? Because he was 18 last year. And I said, yeah, I believe he's 19. And she said, he's not 19. He's actually older. She told me at the time he was 22, almost about to turn 23. I feel like on principle alone, if I would have known how old he actually was, I probably would have stopped talking to him in the first place. I probably never would have talked to him. I mean, he was like 20, 21, almost 22 when I met him, and then almost 23 the last time that we hung out, and I probably wouldn't have kept talking to him. But at the same time, when all this happened, I was already going through enough with CPS and dealing with the my parents' side of CPS and reunification and all of that stuff, and terminating parental rights, and I was going to court for so much stuff around that time, and my depression, my anxiety, my bipolar disorder, I was chocked to the brim full of stuff. So when I thought about reporting him to the police, I never did, because I didn't want to deal with another court case. I didn't want to deal with talking to more cops, and I didn't want to deal with going to the child specialist to point to the doll and tell them where the adult touched you. So I just never did. For me, I don't think that it had a lot of impact on my family because I wasn't speaking to my biological family at the time. And my group home staff, they tried to be supportive. I had one staff member who was super supportive. She sat with me. She cried with me. She helped me with therapy. She helped me make sure I was taking my medications. She did a lot to help me get to a good point. But my caseworker was devastated. She quit her job. And so I got a new caseworker. I think that is probably what sent her over the edge. But I didn't have a lot of friends at the time. I had a couple of girls that I lived with in the group home who also cried with me, and I would have nightmares, so I would sleep with them, and I still talk to one of them today. I don't really talk to all of them anymore, but I mean, it's directly impacted me in ways that I still have trust issues. I still have tons of problems. I don't really suffer from severe depression anymore. I am manic depressive and have bipolar disorder, but I'm pretty good at self-maintaining that. I still have nightmares. I have nightmares all the time about what happened to me, especially the second time. The first time really wasn't too traumatic, but the second time was definitely nail in the coffin for me. And because of that, it has impacted all of my relationships moving forward. I've had so many trust issues. When I met my now husband, I was not an affectionate person. I didn't like to be touched. I didn't like to be held. I didn't like to cuddle. I didn't like to kiss. I didn't like 99% of what makes a relationship. And every time that he told me something, I didn't know if I could trust what he was saying. And I mean, now, we're years down the road and we had a baby together. And so my situation is different with him. I recently started doing spiritual stuff back in December. And I was able to finally break through all of the trauma, and I sat down, I had a conversation with my husband, I told him everything that happened, and now I can be affectionate and I'm not worried that he's going to hurt me. I can cuddle with him without feeling like he's just going to grab me and squeeze me too tight. I can, be intimate with him and not feel like it's gonna result in me getting hurt in some way, shape, or form. And this is all stuff that was very absent from my life for years. And now we have complete open communication. So, having that communication with my husband really makes it to where what Adrian did to me doesn't impact my life now. But it took a long time to get there. My husband, he's definitely the person that's like, don't you fuck with my wife, and so when we talked about all this stuff, it was like, where does he live? What does he drive? What color is his hair? But now, I mean, obviously we're all the way on the other side of the country. So I was on Facebook one day and I actually just casually scrolling, I had seen that one of my friends on Facebook had shared a post that Grace made. And I messaged Grace and I said, that guy that you guys are talking about, I know who he is because he did that to me too. And I told her the timeline. At first I wasn't very open. I was like, oh, yeah, I definitely had that happen to me. And here's my dates for when it happened to me. And that's it. And then she asked me if I would be interested in talking to other people who had been through the same thing, if I wanted to join a group chat, or if I was just interested in telling people what happened to me. And at first I told her, I'm not interested in telling people what happened to me, but I would like to get to know some of them. And so she added me to this group chat with Holly and a whole bunch of other people. And over time, I have just I've been part of the group chat. I have talked to everybody about all sorts of things, and I've read all sorts of crazy things that everybody else has experienced. And because of Grace, I was able to join that group chat and realize that I definitely wasn't alone anymore, and I did have people I could talk to. And so I slowly started to open up. And then when you guys started doing the episodes and they first started airing, I messaged Holly directly and I was like, hey, I want to do it. Now that I've been able to tell my story, I definitely feel a little lighter for sure. Once I was able to, tell the girls about it, I felt a little better. And then, as time's going on, I feel a little bit better. But when I was in therapy and I told my therapist about what happened, my therapist was like, oh, I'm sure it wasn't that bad. I'm sure you were exaggerating, whatever. And that was like a lot of problems for me. So instead of therapy in a way helped me block trauma, but set me 10 million steps back. So today, after talking to you and now I know like people are gonna, obviously he's probably not going around to high schools anymore. He's way too old for that. But now I definitely feel like I'm at least contributing to him not being able to do this anymore. I definitely think that Adrian has a type that he goes for, and I would definitely say that his type is the alternative goth community for sure. I don't think that I ever think that he would ever prey on somebody who's popular or, not goth or emo in some way, shape, or form. When we were fighting, even if we were just screaming at each other, when we would be fighting, I never knew Adrian to drink, so I can't attest to any of that. But when we were fighting, when he was choking me, when he hit me, even when his friends were around, every instance that occurred, his eyes actually were black. And it's actually crazy to me that, for me, I've always been like, oh, I can't remember what his eyes looked like before he was doing this stuff. I kind of always thought that he wore contacts that made his eyes black. But, once I started listening to what everybody else was saying, I was like, that makes sense, because I felt like he was totally normal 1 second and then complete evil darkness. And his eyes were just like piercing black, like he got, I think what it was is he just got so much adrenaline and so much of a rush from hurting people that his pupils were probably the most enormous pupils you've ever seen. I definitely would like for all of the listeners to know how bad of a person he is and how truly evil somebody can be. Just when you think you know somebody, you actually really don't. So if you meet somebody, whether you're meeting them online, whether you meet them in person, whether, you've been talking to them for a long time or a short time, you always have to watch your back. Statistically, men do the same things that Adrian has done to so many people more oftentimes than not. And for me, I think that the best thing that I can benefit from with doing this is that I know that now people know what happened to me, and those people can use my story as a reference to why they shouldn't hang out with people who present the same behaviors, and hopefully I can, hopefully my story can help somebody else. Like I said, he's probably not hanging out at high schools anymore, but I'm sure he's still using the same tactics that he used on me with other people too. So it's only a matter of time before everybody knows all of our stories, and that's it for him. So it won't end until somebody puts a stop to it. And I'm hoping that that's what we're doing. I'm hoping that by everybody doing this, we're putting a stop to it. If I were in front of Adrian right now, I would describe what happened to me in detail the same way that I described it to you. And I would hope that, as a human being, he would feel some sort of guilt or remorse for what he has done and the way that he's impacted my life. I would tell him, how traumatic going through those things was for me and how much I felt like at the time he ruined my life. And I would let him know that because of him, I had to go through so many hoops to be who I am today. Because of him, I partied all the time and I drank all the time and I got high all the time. And I was on a path of, I probably would have died before I was 21 if I didn't get pregnant with my oldest daughter. And I would tell him it's all his fault. Everything from the time that I was 16 until the time that I was 19 when I got pregnant is all his fault. Every bad decision I made, every poor choice that I made to help make myself feel better is all because of him. And I would hope that he would cry, honestly. And then I would probably punch him, but we're not all evil, so maybe I would just hope that, if I didn't punch him, that he at least got the message emotionally and it hurt him in some way, shape, or form. Going through all of this and being on the other side now, if I feel like I'm a stronger person, and I do. I mean, I definitely feel like I'm a way better person, and I feel like I'm a stronger person because of this. And even though it's such a horrible thing that happened, and even though he's such a bad person, in a way, I can be the person that I am today, and I can be the good, kind, caring, helpful person who gives the shirt off their back because of what I went through. If I didn't go through this, I don't know if I would be the same person I am today. And that's what I hold on to, because at least I know through all of this, after everything that happened to me, I was able to find clarity. I mean, I didn't know at first how crazy it was going to be to go through all of this and how traumatic and how bad it would be, but because of going through this, I flipped my life around while I was in CPS. I got the Most Changed Child Award. I stopped sneaking out. I stopped doing all the things I wasn't supposed to do in the group home. But then when I aged out is when I started partying and drinking and getting high all the time. And so I had a bit of a setback. But through all of this, no matter what happened, I came out ahead. I came out on top. I came out stronger. And he gets none of the credit. He tried to destroy me. He tried to make me this weak, fragile person, and he thought that it was going to work, and he thought that I was going to fall in love with him, and I was going to be submissive, and he was going to get away with doing all of this to me. And at the end, he doesn't. I get the credit for changing, and I get the credit for becoming a better person. And he can't take that away from me.
Before we wrap up, I want to take a minute to say this. There is a conversation going on about ethics and true crime. Now, Amanda and I are by no means perfect, and we never want to paint ourselves as such. But we want everyone to know that the voice of the victims, no matter what, it's the most important. There are people who often use true crime as murder porn, or very unfortunately, overglorify the assailants or murderers. Now, Amanda and I do not condone such behavior. We understand that true crime is an intriguing topic and that sometimes we just want to know the psychology behind the actions, but we also want to make this very clear. The victim's memory and story should always be respected, and sensationalism is not something that we vibe with. We've learned a ton in our 11 months or so of podcasting. We've made mistakes, but our own intention has never been nor ever will be for harm. We simply want to bring awareness, maybe offer up some lessons to learn, facts, and just respect. With that, our request that when you listen to our podcast or when you consume any true crime, to please keep the victims in your mind and remember, the families of the victims and also the survivors don't see this as entertainment. They see this as something awful that's happened to them. If I were to recommend any ethical true crime podcast to listen to, I would say that the two that stand out in the forefront of my own mind would be Voices for Justice with Sarah Turney and True Consequences with Eric Carter Londine.
Before we conclude this series, we have a final word from the survivors. Please take a moment to listen.
We are the bees who plucked off our wings, and now they're growing back, and we're stinging. You can't run, can't hide from us, Adrian. And I hope that this haunts you for the rest of your fucking life. When you mess with the bees.
Adrian. I have two main things I'd like to say to you. The first is a little bit of advice. Now what you're going to do is go to your local Target. You're going to go buy some Dr. Bronner's soap. You're going to go in the shower. And then when you go in there, you're going to use that soap to wash your penis. I know that this is like brand new information to you and it's really foreign, but I think it would really work out well for you. Second thing is that I hope you know that we aren't going to stop until you are locked away where you belong, rotting in a jail cell, not being able to hurt anyone else ever again. Because when you mess with the bees...
This is for Adrian. Although you never met me, you took advantage of my kindness. I not only tried to help you financially, but mentally, and you didn't break me. You may think that you're a mastermind at this since you've been at this for so long, but you're not. And I want to thank you for all the people that you've got me in contact with. I have such amazing friends now, and they've all been people that you have did something to, and we all have that in common. And so I guess this is just me saying that whatever you do in life, you're always gonna be a fake Walmart version. You're not in a fucking band like you said you were. You lie, you cheat, you put your hands on people, and you try to make yourself out to be this amazing person. But whatever you're gonna do in life, you're just gonna be trying to be someone that you're not. And you're not Ollie Sykes, you're not Christopher Drew, you're not anybody. You're fake. And when you mess with the fucking bees...
Listen, Adrian, no matter where you run, no matter where you hide, you will remember everything that you have done to each and every one of us. And you have to live with those memories. And not only now will it be you living with those memories and us living with those memories, but everyone will know everything that you have done. No matter what, at the end of the day, when you close your eyes, there is no outcome where this works out for you. So you can keep trying to do these things to these people and keep thinking that you're gonna get away with it. But when you mess with the bees...
Adrian, when I think of you, I think of all the desolation that you have left in your path. All of the women and children that you tried to break. All of the lies, abuse, and torment you created over the last decade. What I can't quite grasp and understand is while all of this has gone on, your parents were aware and supplied you with a free home to condone this type of behavior, and even helped you escape prosecution for the heinous acts you partook in. You put us through dark times, but your dark time is coming. Your time of hiding has come to an end, and we are coming for you, and we are ready to fight. Because when you mess with the bees, they are here to protect the queen. We are the queen, and our bees are ready to protect us and anyone else you ever try to hurt.
Adrian, I hope that you now know that I was right when I said that one day everyone would see the truth about who you really are. I hope that you know that everything you stole from each and every one of us is all coming back to you. I hope you wake up with that same fear that you gave every single one of us every day, not knowing what will happen to you. I hope it eats you alive at night and that you can't sleep, but it would still only be half of what you've put us through. We're finding our strength, taking our power back, and using our voices against you, because when you mess with the bees, you get the hive.
This concludes Minding the Beehive, Surviving a Serial Rapist, and also Season 2 of A Nefarious Nightmare.
We plan to be back mid to late July with Season 3, and we will be attending Dallas True Crime Podcast Festival August 26th, 27th, and 28th. We thank everyone for their participation in this, whether they are interviewed, reenacting, or even just listening. Please be vigilant.
Thank you for listening to a Nefarious Nightmare podcast. Music used in this podcast was originally composed by Ghost Stories Incorporated and remixed by Ryan RCX Murphy. Please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or on any podcast platform that accepts ratings and reviews. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, don't be a dick and wear deodorant.